the evil Elvis impersonator. Some people have some pretty weird triggers, and back when I used Twitter, I'd see people listing things like Fall Guys or baked beans or happiness or Dream the Minecraft YouTuber as trigger warnings. Okay, maybe the last one is fair, but I used to kind of roll my eyes and think, how did these people actually manage to make it through life being triggered by the little beans from Fall Guys? And then I developed severe PTSD from Elvis Presley and I understood. Okay, yeah, maybe I am being a bit goofy here, but it's just to mask the pain, really. I genuinely do become a sobbing, quivering wreck if I look at Elvis Presley too long, or worse, an Elvis Presley impersonator. I'm not even exaggerating either. It began when I was invited to a Halloween party with a specific costume gimmick. That gimmick? Freaking Elvis. Entrance was $5, or if you came dressed as Elvis, you got in free. I did not have an Elvis costume, so I just paid the $5 entrance fee. And I'd say about half of the partygoers skipped the Elvis nonsense too. But that still left 30 or 40 poorly conceived Elvises who had not left the building. And I'm not great with super tight crowds, and the party was way busier than it should have been. It was held in someone's house, and I don't think they realized the draw that the Elvis gimmick would create. There were men trying their best to be the king. There were goofy Elvises dancing in their blue suede shoes. There was sexy Elvises, both female and male. And I even saw one girl using the anonymity of her Elvis mask to repeatedly flash her breasts. And I was glad that I'd shown up in sensible jeans and a strappy top. I can't go wrong with being boring, and I'd gotten a ride with a friend who doesn't drink, so I helped myself to a beer from the keg. I needed it to deal with the ongoing atmosphere. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, as part of the Elvis gimmick, guess what singer was playing constantly on the stereo? Absolutely no break from Elvis's greatest hits playing on repeat via Spotify. And even after my first drink, I was deeply regretting being there. But my friend had wanted to come, and she really loved Elvis. And when I decided to get my second drink, a short female Elvis stumbled up to me and handed me a red plastic cup of beer. She mumbled something about suspicious minds and sort of staggered off. Now, normally I would never accept a drink from a stranger, but even with the Elvis costume, I recognized her as another friend from college. Little did I realize that she wasn't saying suspicious minds, and she was trying to tell me that the drink was suspicious and could I get rid of it for her. After the events of the party, I asked her why she handled it this way, and she could barely even remember. She said that she was drunk and scared that there was an Elvis who wouldn't leave her alone, and she was worried that her drink was spiked. Of course, being the buzzed idiot I was and having sensory overload from so much Elvis, I just downed that drink. And I don't think it was roofied or anything. I've been roofied before, sadly, and it didn't feel like that. But there was something in that drink. Something that almost immediately started giving me a headache and the sweats. I started looking around for my friend, trying to tell her that I needed to go and that I really didn't feel good. And that's when I saw him. The most realistic-looking Elvis at the party. He didn't wear a mask. His hair was styled in a pompadour. And he wore Elvis sunglasses and that white rhinestone suit that made the king so famous. And there was only one man that I knew who could look that much like Elvis without actually being Elvis. And remember when I said that I'd been roofied before? Well, I'd been roofied by my ex-boyfriend a year before, and he had that same baby face, that same dark hair, the same build, everything. This was him. The Elvis staring at me across the room was my ex-boyfriend, Rodney. I'd had to take a restraining order out against him. I was never able to prove that he was the one who roofied me, but he became what they called a fixated individual after I broke up with him. A complete and utter nut job. And now here he was dressed as Elvis, watching me from across the room. And I know he was watching me because he did that thing where he used his 2 fingers to point to his eyes and then to me as to say, "Hey, I'm watching you." And I darted into the other room looking for my friend. Where the hell was she? I squeezed through the crowd, shoving lesser Elvises left and right, and people started yelling at me, telling me to watch it. But I could feel evil Elvis's eyes on me. And sure enough, when I looked around, there he was slowly walking through the crowd like Michael Myers or some crap, but a perfect depiction of Elvis. I ducked into another room. What was this house, I thought? Why were there so many rooms and so many people dressed as Elvis? Was this even real, or the drugs from the drink playing havoc with my system? I couldn't really tell in the moment, but I knew that I had to get out of there. The Elvis was still pursuing me, and I tried to tell myself that it was just the drugs and alcohol, but he was slowly following me. And I think that I must have just kept looping around the house, barely coherent because he always seemed to be there. Eventually, I found myself outside in the front yard. More Elvises milled around and music was playing from some type of outdoor system. I turned to the front door and evil Elvis stood there. There was no mistaking it. It was my ex-boyfriend Rod. He had this sort of knowing, smug grin on his face that was so familiar to me. The terror of him catching me was unspeakable. And then, despite pursuing me slowly for most of the night, he just suddenly leaped down the porch steps and came running directly at me. His sunglasses stayed on his face, his Elvis sideburns obscured his features somewhat, and I was certain it was him though. Why else would he be charging at me? I was confused, but I screamed. I turned to run and my legs just gave out from under me. This evil Rodney Elvis was on top of me, grabbing at my hair and my clothes, and I have no idea what he had planned. It was like he was trying to just strip me naked there on the front lawn in front of numerous other people. Rodney always was some complete psychopath, especially when he was on coke or some other drug, which was often. Thankfully, the crowd didn't take kindly to an Elvis Presley impersonator trying to violate me out front. The biggest, fattest Elvis I'd ever seen came thundering along the lawn, and I later realized that he was wearing a fat suit as part of his costume. And the whole stick was Elvis just before he died. At the time, though, the hamburger sticking out of his jacket pockets just made me feel like I was going mad. But I didn't care. Fat Elvis leaped the final distance towards evil Elvis, my ex-boyfriend, and their bodies slammed so hard that the pair of them went flying across the lawn. I pulled myself to my feet, unfortunately puking as I did so, which in retrospect I think saved me from whatever dodgy drug had been slipped into that drink earlier in the night. Fat Elvis was doing his best to stomp on evil Elvis, but his bulk, or rather the fat suit, was getting in the way. But now others were joining in. This group of random Elvis Presleys just absolutely pounding on evil Elvis. And that's when my ex-boyfriend rolled free and pulled out a gun. And within seconds he fired, hitting Fat Elvis square in the stomach. This Fat Elvis reeled back, fell over, and the other Elvises kind of held up their hands in surrender, backing away from evil Elvis. As he stepped away, he fired one more shot into the air, causing everyone to duck, and then just took off into the darkness around the side of the house. A couple of the Elvises wanted to follow him, but the rest of us told them not to. The guy was armed, and then I told him that I knew who he was and we could just call the cops. And now, after all the chaos, skip forward a few hours. I found my friend who took me to the police station and I explained everything. I told them that my attacker was my ex-boyfriend Rodney and explained the history. They ended up looking him up and the officer gave me this very strange and grave look. Rodney had been arrested a day ago for armed robbery on a convenience store in a completely different state, she explained. And she went on to tell me that he was still in custody and had been so for at least 24 hours. Now, I kept insisting. I was certain that that evil Elvis was Rodney, and she even put a call into the sheriff's department where he was being held. No question, he was still incarcerated. There was no humanly possible way that evil Elvis was Rodney. And later they questioned him about the incidents, and apparently he was just completely clueless. And they told me he even seemed to express genuine concern for me. And there you have it. A couple of years ago, I was stalked and attacked by an evil Elvis impersonator who appeared out of the night. And I have absolutely no idea who he was or why he targeted me. He looked so much like Rodney that I could swear that it was him. But there was no way it was. And so now, anytime I see anyone dressed like the king, even Elvis himself, I remember back to that Halloween party, and I think about what he tried to do to me and what could have happened. One piece of good news was that plus-size Elvis, like I mentioned, was wearing what turned out to be an extremely large and cumbersome fat suit. He was a skinny guy, and that meant that the bullet from Elvis's handgun was actually blocked by all the foam in that costume. So plus-size Elvis, who actually turned out to be a friend of mine from college under all tea, had makeup and fat suit, was absolutely fine. Now, I have no idea what became of evil Elvis. I'll scour the news for an Elvis impersonator committing violent crimes, but I've never found anything like that. And all I can hope is that he was just picked up for some other offense. And the only Elvis impersonation he's doing these days is hopefully the jailhouse rock.